I hope everyone's day is going good so far. We'd actually love to know where you are tuning from. So you may answer this poll that we are sharing right now. And you can say if you're tuning in from Luzon, Metro Manila, or maybe Visayas, maybe some of you are from Mindanao. Oh, we have people tuning outside of the Philippines. That is very interesting. We have a very diverse set of attendees today. Yeah, I hope you guys had your breakfast already, or for people from outside of the Philippines. Yeah, I hope your day is going good so far. Thank you for tuning into our webinar today. We'd also like to ask you another question. So we're actually quite interested. Which among the three alternative protein pillars are you most interested in? So there's the plant-based, there's a fermentation, and there's a cultivated meat. So we'd like to know which among these are you most interested in? Here you go. You may answer the poll. I see. So majority are so far interested in the plant-based aspect, but we have a surprising amount of people who are also interested in the cultivated meat, while some are also interested in the fermentation. That's good. We will be talking about all three pillars today, and I hope that for people who are already knowledgeable about it, will still find something useful in the presentation. But also for the people who have no clue or have no background yet on these three pillars, I hope you learned something useful today, and I hope that it will be something that is applicable to what you're doing right now. All right. Okay. It's now 10:05, so we will officially start now. Okay. So good morning, everyone. I am Carmel, the project manager and research associate of the Alternative Protein Scoping Project, and I will be your host for today. We welcome you to our webinar titled Understanding the Alternative Protein Landscape, where the alternative protein researchers of the Animal Empathy Philippines will launch and present their key findings on the current status, challenges, and opportunities of alternative proteins, specifically meat alternatives in the Philippines. We invited stakeholders from the science and technology, industry, and policy sectors, as well as those interested individuals from the general public. You guys may currently play a role or in the development or progress of the local alternative protein landscape. We hope that the findings of our scoping study will be informative and useful for you. When you develop your research ideas, you may want to collaborate with the other stakeholders present here, or you may want to craft some reports or policies that will be useful in advancing the space. So for those who just came in, please also check the chat box for our webinar rules. So just to reiterate some of them, um, the webinar right now is being recorded, and all the features such as chat, unmute, and start video are currently disabled so as to avoid distractions and disturbances during the webinar. If you would like to ask a question about the presentation later, you may select the Q&A option below. So it should be available below your screen to enter your question. So you may upvote questions. It's just the like button. You may upvote them if you want the researchers to prioritize answering some of those questions. You may also comment on some questions if you'd like to provide a follow-up question or even an insight. So we do understand that we have stakeholders here from different sectors who may be knowledgeable on some aspects and would also want to provide their insight. This is very much welcome. Now, due to the time constraints, those that will be unanswered will be pulled by the researchers. So we will answer them and send the answers in your email along with your certificate. Lastly, your certificates of attendance will be provided upon completion of the feedback form. So please stay until the end of the program to get access to the feedback form and consequently get your certificate. Thank you very much. Okay, so now may I call on one of Animal Empathy Philippines co-founder Ging Geronimo for the welcome remarks.
Thanks, Carmel. Can everyone hear me? To the representatives from various government departments and offices, entrepreneurs, scientists, food technologists, researchers, animal advocates, my colleagues at AAP, friends, good morning. It's my pleasure to welcome you to this webinar and report launch on the scoping study on alternative proteins. Today, we will learn about the current status, challenges, and opportunities of proteins or sustainable proteins in the Philippines. I had my first plant-based food in 2011 at a restaurant in Los Baños, Laguna called Bingo. During that time, I had no idea about plant-based foods yet. These days, one can easily buy plant-based foods at convenience stores like 7-Eleven. This event is taking place at a time when our country is facing escalated food and nutrition risks. And later today, you will be hearing from our out-protein researchers. I would like to express my gratitude to our researchers and to all of you for taking the time to listen to the results of their scoping study and to their recommendations. This scoping project was initially a capstone project born from discussions among Filipinos after completing the Alternative Proteins Fundamentals Program, which is a cohort-based program run by Cambridge University Alternative Protein Society, and the Good Foods Institute. Whether you are a scientist working on alternative proteins or an entrepreneur interested to venture into the sector, it is our hope that knowledge exchange through this event will promote solutions to the evolving challenges faced by the sustainable protein sector in the country. Let this be a meeting of minds and a birthplace of ideas. May we explore new avenues for cross-sector collaboration, across the entire agriculture and food value chain, via policy and technological interventions, using nature-based solutions where appropriate. Today, may we all step up and suggest new ways to innovate and strengthen our research and development capacity in this country, offer opinions and provide advice to everyone, and devise quick plans and actions to turn those ideas into reality. Most importantly, may we all seize this opportunity to get to know and are interested in alternative or sustainable proteins, albeit online. Let us work together to accelerate alternative or sustainable proteins and help create a sustainable food system for future generations. Maraming salamat po.
Thanks, Ging. So this scoping study and webinar wouldn't be possible without the Animal Empathy Philippines. So let's give a warm welcome to Kate Lupango, AEP's co-founder and executive director, for a short introduction about our organization.
Thank you, Carmel. Good morning, everyone. So I hope you can hear me clearly. So we're grateful for your interest in learning more about alternative protein and taking the time in attending this webinar. So as defined by Good Food Institute or GFI, next slide, please. Alternative proteins are proteins produced from animals, plants, and by way of fermentation. So these innovations are designed to taste the same as or better than our conventional animal products. There are three main alternative protein production methods or pillars. So these are plant-based meat, cultivated meat, and fermentation. So we will get to know more about this pillar throughout the webinar. Next slide. So with our current and conventional way of producing proteins, alternative proteins have potential in responding to our multidimensional world problems. So there are actually three main factors as to why alternative proteins is important in the Philippines. So first, its potential in reducing the sufferings of farm animals. Second, it will provide a better way of addressing food security in the country. And last, since alternative protein will require few lands and water, it will help in sustainability and environmental impact. For our organization, so Animal Empathy Philippines, we see that advancing alternative proteins will have a positive impact for farm animals, given that the scale of animals being farmed and the amount of suffering they have faced. So Animal Empathy Philippines, next slide, is a nonprofit organization that aims to strengthen the farm animal advocacy in the Philippines by building community, capacity, and relationship. And our vision is a world where no animals would suffer due to humans. At Animal Empathy Philippines, or AEP, we believe that understanding and relating to other perspectives, emotions, and thoughts are crucial in creating a positive and inclusive community environment. So next slide. Second, we believe we value rationality. So our organizations and communities can make positive impact for animals by making data-informed decisions. And lastly, when we enable people or Filipinos to bring their perspective and experiences to the community, we will build a relationship that is needed to co-create a better world for farm animals. Next slide. So here's our theory of change, so animal empathy's theory of change. So this theory of change serves as a backbone of all decision making and also the reason for our mission, so the stated mission that we have. So we believe that advancing alternative proteins in the Philippines will build capacity and relationship that would enable more Filipinos to work on this area. That would eventually lead into reducing the sufferings for farm animals. Next slide. Okay. There are actually three main ways. So there are main three ways that you can help farm animals. First is be a farm animal advocate. So this is through creating awareness for farm animal issues and ways on how Filipinos can make difference for the farm animals. Second is related to our webinar today is through supporting plant-based initiatives or alternative proteins in the country. So by helping to create more sustainable and equitable world by shifting to animal-free alternatives and spreading more information about the local plant-based initiative being done in the country. And then last is to get more engagement in research and policy. So we know that there's a lot of policy and research that still needs to be done to bring attention to the farm animal issues and also give more opportunities. So we want to give this attention to general publics and lawmakers to be able to shape and have a greater protection for farm animals. Next slide. Okay, so AAP is founded in 2021, and for 2022, here are some of the highlights of the program we did in collaboration with different organizations and startup business. Next slide. For this year, so we have a lot of projects. So some of this I'll be explaining. So first is we're conducting monthly events for farm animal advocates that aims to discuss issues and ideas. And another is also doing more public awareness to reach more people in different areas. Next slide. As mentioned, we value data-driven informations and community. So we're also working on building a space for community members to learn more about farm animal movement through reading session, community hub, and fellowship. And lastly, so next slide. So we're doing several research to be able to support more initiatives. So just this studies that we're presenting, which is alternative scoping study, there are other proposed research initiatives that we are doing, so such as the animal advocates journey mapping and some of the related animal specific research. Next slide. So if you're interested to know more about AEP and farm animal advocacy, so you can scan this code and you can fill up the interest survey form if you want to get in touch with us or set up a one-on-one. Or you can also join our community. So we have a Slack and Facebook group. And if you have further questions or propose project collaboration, so please email me at kate@animalempathy.ph. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ging, or Kate, sorry, for aptly summarizing what AEP is doing and how alternative proteins can connect to farm animal welfare. Just like what they said, This is one of the initiatives of AEP to reduce the animal product consumption. However, there is more to alternative proteins, and this is why the 5 researchers of Animal Empathy Philippines convened and conducted this scoping study. So next slide, please. So here we can see the 5 researchers, including yours truly, and we met in the Cambridge Alternative Protein Fundamentals program, where we decided to do something to help advance the local alternative protein landscape. So Piers here, Piers Manlangit, he completed his master's degree at Radboud University, Netherlands, where he worked on collaborative projects focused on cultivated meat from top research universities in Switzerland, Canada, and Singapore. So his focus on the report is on cultivated meat. Now for Gianna Nuncio, she works as a research and development specialist at Worth the Health Foods. So this is a plant-based meat startup here in the country. And she's responsible for developing their plant-based seafood products. So she is currently completing her master's in food science now in University of the Philippines, Diliman. So next, and she is also focusing on the plant-based meat aspect of our report. So next, we have Therese Rigor. So Therese works as a research and development specialist at Mondenizin Corporation, where she specializes in the non-animal-based proteins department. So she got her degree, her bachelor's degree in food technology in the University of the Philippines, Diliman. So lastly, for Adrian Fritz Para, so he is also a food technology graduate from the University of the Philippines, Diliman, and he is also currently doing some consultancy work for MSMEs who specialize in food products. So now, these two are focusing on the fermentation-derived meat aspect of our report, right? And lastly, so you have me, I'm Carmel, and I am the project manager and research associate. And I am currently a food technology student in UP Diliman. And I got involved in the alternative protein scene through the Cambridge Alternative Proteins Fundamentals program, and also dabbled a bit on the collaborative project where it involved some precision fermentation. So there you go. Now you've met all the researchers for our alternative protein study. So now this webinar is actually the culmination of our 4-month scoping study. And so we'd like to present to you our key findings. So now our 2 of my colleagues, Gianna and Piers, will present to you our studies.
So good morning, everyone, and to every other people tuning in from all parts of the world. Am I audible? Today we'll be presenting our study on understanding the Philippine alternative protein landscape, where we talk about the key insights from our scoping report. So we only highlight the main features of the report, and you can access the report later when we officially launch it. So let's set some agenda. First, we talk about the problem and then the proposed solution. We talk about the theory of change and the approach for how we do the scoping study. And then we go over through the main findings of the 3 pillars. And finally, we provide some conclusions and recommended action steps to advance the field. So first, for the problem and solution. Meat consumption is at an exponential trend in the world. When we focus across the major country groups, the same trend goes for the rest of Asia. And when we look closer, the Philippines was noted to be among the world's fastest growing meat consumer. And this trend is often attributed to the reason that as income levels increase, so does meat consumption. And in the next decades, the UN projects the Philippines to be one of the 8 countries to have the most population growth. And with national surveys presenting protein inadequacies of around 12 to 14% among Filipino children and adolescents in poor and rural areas, the next question that comes to mind would be, How will we feed 140 million Filipinos by 2050? Sustainably, when animal agriculture generates most water, air, and land pollution in the Philippines. Efficiently, when 75% of agricultural land for livestock provides only one-third of global protein supply. And safely, when antibiotic resistance is an increasing threat with mismanagement from animal agriculture in the Philippines. Our proposed solution would be alternative proteins as a way to feed a fast growing population in a sustainable, efficient, and safe way. So, how will it look like? Let's take our favorite almusal or breakfast, corned beef. First, we can make this meat product from plants, where we mimic the meat components that only cost a fraction of the resources. Second, we can also make these meat products from microorganisms, which are fast growers and that may also just require side streams from agricultural waste. And lastly, we can make meat directly from animal cells that we need. So a cow from corned beef would take around 15 months to harvest meat. Cow cells would only take around 3 to 4 days to grow into a meat that would look like a meat brewery, like how we would see in beer. And frankly speaking, this is a more pleasant image than industrial animal agriculture. So alternative proteins can be patterned like renewable energy sector. So energy consumption will only increase and we can only do so much to tell people to cut down on electricity consumption. The better way is to innovate how we can produce energy sustainably. And in the same way, meat consumption will only increase. So we need to innovate ways of producing meat, hence alternative proteins. Now that we have a good picture of the problem and the proposed solution, I pass the floor to Gianna to discuss the next thing in our agenda, the approach and theory of change.
Thank you very much, Pierce. So, North American and European regions have led the way in the commercialization of plant-based, fermentation, and cultivated meat products. Meanwhile, the alternative protein market in the Asia Pacific is rapidly growing, with neighbors such as Australia, Singapore, and Thailand reaping significant economic benefits and innovation. However, in the Philippines, alternative meat awareness and consumption are largely limited to individuals following a vegan or vegetarian diet. Many Filipinos are still unfamiliar with the existence, goals, and importance of alternative proteins. So, to better understand the current status, opportunities, and challenges of alternative proteins in the Philippines, we conducted a literature-based scoping report. Our research involved a review of various online sources, including scientific journals, government and institutional websites, business databases, and news outlets to gain insights into the alternative protein activities in or related to the Philippines. We acknowledge our limitations in obtaining valuable information from offline studies and in terms of specific knowledge. For this report, alternative proteins will pertain to alternative meat and not include alternative dairy or eggs. The scoping report focuses on providing a broad and general overview of alternative protein landscape in the Philippines. Based on our initial assessment, the Good Food Institute's theory of change is a good framework for navigating the alternative food scene in the Philippines. We aim for we aim for the report to be used to multiple stakeholders, primarily in the science, industry, and policy sector, who play crucial roles in developing the field. Our goals are to highlight the knowledge gaps, guide collaboration, and outline actionable steps to develop alternative proteins in the Philippines. So now we move on to plant-based meat. Plant-based meat is a term used for meat products made from plants that serve as the right alternative to animal-based meat. For our purposes, traditional soy and wheat products such as tofu, bean curd, seitan, and tempeh will not be included for this category. We focus on next-generation plant-based meat, which is produced using a biomimicry approach. The goal is to make it look, cook, smell, and taste like traditional meat.
The first steps in the general method used to produce plant-based meat are the following. So crops are grown and selected as a source of raw materials. And second, crops are processed to obtain the desired ingredients. Next, to achieve the taste and texture of meat, protein, lipids, functional compounds are isolated from plants and processed together to create plant-based meat. Plant produce like peas, soy, or wheat can be made to look and taste like our beloved favorite Filipinos, giniling, sisig. Despite being a relatively new introduction in the Philippines, plant-based meat has already attracted attention from various sectors. The Philippines, with its biodiversity, has an abundant source of crops and potential plant proteins. Majority of the plant-based meat sources are soy and wheat, which are widely processed and imported from other countries. Potential local crops for processing into plant-based meat products are identified as jackfruit, mung bean, rice, and potato. For large-scale ingredient sources because of their significant production volume in the Philippines. These crops can be redirected towards production as ingredient sources. Legumes like cowpea and pigeon pea are some of the other notable crops with existing ingredient potential and existing local supply. Existing research institutions are capable of developing crop varieties with optimal protein content. Research focus can be directed to developing crop varieties with optimal protein content and identifying other local protein sources. Local crops may be available. However, the current post-harvest processing methods of farmer cooperatives produce ingredients that have inconsistent or unreliable quality and supply for large-scale manufacturing. It is difficult then to source an abundant supply of processed and isolated proteins locally. Furthermore, lack of local technology and infrastructure support hampers manufacturing progress. So, some equipment for conventional meat products can be utilized for its plant-based counterparts, but in order to scale up ingredient production and end product manufacturing, dedicated equipment with standardized processes and systems are necessary. The Philippine meat pre-sales in 2021 was 3.4 billion pesos. It is forecasted to reach 3.6 billion pesos by 2026, with a compound annual growth rate of 1.2%. The market for plant-based products in APAC is expected to be around 30 billion US dollars by 2027 at a CAGR of 18.9%. Among 11 APAC markets, the Philippines ranked highest with 62% of the respondents in openness to plant-based foods. A consumer insight reported 65% of Filipino respondents, or 9,220 respondents, have already consumed plant-based food alternatives, while 45% of them have tried plant-based meat. Consumer surveys have highlighted that health is the main reason why Filipinos shift their diets to plant-based food alternatives. Top 2 and 3 reasons following also vary in the consumer reports. So after health can come animal welfare concerns and diet preferences, or weight loss and cost effectiveness can also come next. Obstacles, on the other hand, include consumer perception of plant-based meat as inferior quality mimics or as luxury products. So taste, nutrition, and price point are common consumer concerns. We recommend examining and conducting consumer behavior studies and motivations on a larger scale, as well as marketing studies on consumer perception. Additional benefits of plant-based meat, such as its positive impacts and increased visibility, can boost consumer awareness. Philippine industry key players of plant-based meat are Century Pacific Food, San Miguel Foods, GCH Group of Companies, Skitless, and WTH Foods, with brands such as Unmeat, Viga, Meat Magic, and Umani. More commonplace are SMEs and community food services that cater plant-based versions of Filipino dishes. Majority of plant-based foods offered predominantly utilize soy and wheat as their protein sources, and products can be found in grocery chains, specialty shops, and e-commerce platforms. We collated the brands, products, and all these information in an Airtable database, which will be available in the report. Neighboring countries in the APAC region are benefiting significantly from the growth of the plant-based industry. Additional investment can be attracted to the local industry with the help of BOI government agencies, and APAC venture capital firms. There are clear regulations for plant-based product categories and government calls for plant-based R&D, manufacturing, and consumption. Main opportunities arise by increasing visibility of plant-based meat products alongside their conventional counterparts, and also increasing their availability in food delivery apps and digital platforms. Creating plant-based alternatives for traditional Filipino meat dishes and exploring the use of other plant-based protein ingredients with low allergenicity are also new product pathways. We also recommend conducting a market analysis of the local plant-based meat industry to quantify its impact on the Philippine economy. And we encourage collaboration between and within industries to drive innovation and progress. The main challenge is inadequate funding for businesses that want to deep dive into supplying ingredients and manufacturing plant-based meat. High prices and limited variety may also discourage consumers from purchasing or repurchasing products. Now I will hand it back to Pierce for fermentation-derived meat and cultured meat.
Thanks, Gianna. So let's go to fermentation. So fermentation in the context of alt proteins can be understood in three primary ways. The first one involves traditional fermentation, using live intact microorganisms to modulate and process plant-derived ingredients that result in unique flavor profiles and nutritional profiles with modified texture. So fermenting soybeans to make tempeh is an example. Second one is biomass fermentation, which uses fast growth and high protein content of many microorganisms to efficiently produce large quantities of protein. An example with this would be corn. And lastly, precision fermentation uses designed microbial hosts as cell factories to produce specific functional ingredients. The heme from soy that is used by Impossible Foods to make their burgers red is an example. So in our report, we focus on biomass and precision fermentations, which have great benefits of being targeted, aka what you want, so protein-rich biomass and functional ingredients, and utilize diverse metabolic pathways and end products. An example with which is air protein, which is microorganisms using air elements to produce biomass. In the Philippines, fermentation-derived meat has been explored, but it may need more support to flourish. So across science sector, strain development and alternative media research are existing, but they are not currently focused towards alternative proteins. And the available infrastructures like the culture collection and strains available from that culture selection can support the industry of fermentation-derived meat. From the industry, corn remains the only commercially available fermentation-derived meat in the Philippines. And consumer survey reports that fermentation-derived meat consumption is mainly driven by environmental and health reasons. And available startup support is also present among the APAC region. For policy, there's no clear regulatory pathway or framework for fermentation-derived meats. However, a food and safety regulation workshop has been conducted by the WHO Western Pacific to understand its current status. The grants and aid from the government can also fund fermentation-derived research. With this, the opportunity lies in reaching out to existing institutions to increase fermentation-derived meat-related efforts, and the opportunity to develop more affordable but also locally contextualized products. The main challenges for fermentation-derived meat occur from strategies for strain development for alt proteins, which may be expensive if done comprehensively. The unclear regulatory pathways puts industries in a difficult position, and novel foods like fermentation-derived meat may be difficult to navigate with consumer perception. And finally, the last pillar would be cultured meat. So cultured meat is meat produced directly from animal cells. So we take a biopsy from an animal and grow it in a condition with nutrients and um, factors that mimic the physiological conditions of an animal. And these are grown in large-scale biotank reactors that would look like beer breweries. And when sufficient mass is obtained, they are then processed into 3D structures that would look familiar, like a hamburger. So the main benefits of cultured meat is that it is controlled, having less saturated fat, purer and more consistent supply. It is efficient such that around 2,000 to 4,000% more meat is produced than cows. And it is safe because it reduces zoonotic outbreak and antibiotic usage. A short timeline of cultivated meat can be followed. In 2013, the Netherlands produced the first cultivated hamburger. 7 years after, the first cultivated chicken nugget has been sold in Singapore. And 2 years after, a first FDA-approved cultivated meat product in the US has been released. However, in the Philippines, cultivated meat is largely unrecognized, but it has unexplored potential. In the science, cell culture is still tied primarily to cancer, research, and stem cell therapy. However, it is promising because cell lines such as bangus, like milkfish, tilapia, Manila clam, and even native chickens have been established and characterized. Other research trusts that may help the cultivated meat sector would be biobanking initiatives and seaweed and algae research for potential scaffolding. For the industry, around 4.6 million US dollars have been invested overseas in choke meats by a Philippine-based company. And around 43% of the 14,000 Filipinos indicated in a consumer survey that they would eat cultivated meat. As with fermentation-derived meat, startup support for cultivated meat also is present for APAC region. But no regulatory framework still exists for policy in cultivated meat in the Philippines. Opportunity lies on reaching out to existing institutions to help in increasing cultivated meat-related efforts. The main challenges would be to shift health and existing industries to work on cultivated meat activities, and with unclear regulations and consumer perception for novel food, might prove difficult for cultivated meat to flourish in the Philippines. And with that, we arrive to our concluding and recommendations. So alternative protein activities exist in the country, but it may require ecosystems level to support its flourishing. We've identified key areas and action points to support this. In the science sector, we want to collaborate with research organizations and universities to help them navigate how they can contribute to the alternative protein science in the Philippines. For industry, specifically for plant-based industry players, we want to provide avenues to have dialogue that can increase supply chain support and help them integrate plant-based into Filipino diets. And lastly, for policy, that we would collaborate on non-governmental and non-profit organizations, or even directly with policymakers, to navigate how to increase government involvement and support, either through financial to regulatory. And with that, we'd like to thank the Good Food Institute for providing the main framework of approach through the study, looking into the science, industry, and policy sector, and a survey of technical aspects per sector, the Effective Altruism Animal Welfare Fund for providing funding and communication and the next steps for the research, and the alternative protein experts and animal advocates, both from local and international, for providing valuable feedback and contributions to the research. And with that, we'd like to formally launch our report publicly, which can be accessed through this QR code and website. Thank you for your attention, and we're happy to take in questions, and feedback is welcome. If you see that we may have presented some outdated or incorrect data, please feel free to bring the right resource for us to update our report. Good epistemics is foundational to move forward. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that wonderful presentation, Gianna and Pierce. So I guess you've summarized our scoping report well. Although, like what they've mentioned, since we have time constraints here, our presentation is kind of some very summarized. So we encourage you to actually access our report to see the full scope of the scoping report. So yes, right now it's already Q&A time. Please drop your questions in the Q&A portion. You can see it below your screen. And then we will answer the questions. So right, first things first, this was asked earlier. Will a copy of the presentation slides be given to the attendees? So right now, we do not intend to give a copy of our presentation slides, but we will instead give you access to our report, which is flashed right here now on the screen. So it is because we expect that the report is much fuller and much more informative than our presentation slides. But if you do need it for some specific reason, you may reach out to us in our email at team@animalempathy.ph. Okay, so another question. Do the researchers account for the negative impact of a consumerist or capitalist approach? Wait, it got lost. Okay, there you go. Capitalist approach in promoting a shift to the alternative and more ethical proteins. So does anyone from our researchers now would like to answer this question?
I can try to answer it. So it will be inevitable that we will increase our meat consumption. So the solution for this is that we innovate the way we produce or consume meat that is more ethical and sustainable. In the other way, the alternative protein field not only brings sustainable, more livable world, it also creates more jobs and opportunities for people to get involved.
Okay, so I hope that answers our attendees' question, but you may also add a follow-up question should you want a more elaborate answer. Okay, so another question that is highly upvoted: what is the history of vegetarianism or veganism in the Philippines? And how do you think it would play into people's acceptance of plant-based meat? So for questions like these, we would also like to open the floor for our AEP co-founders, especially because some of the questions are also targeted to them. So yeah, anyway, anyone from the researchers who'd like to address this?
Hello. So apparently, pre-colonial times, a lot of the indigenous crops and vegetables were consumed mostly, and meat started being a main dish when during the Spanish colonization. So after that, people really thought Filipinos mainly put meat as their main dishes, but there are some vegetarians, but they're only in small societies. For example, Chinese Buddhists, or um, like some sort of halal or some Muslim also, or some Indian communities in the Philippines, small communities are vegetarians. For veganism, it arose mostly from the Western concept. So when the Americans came to colonize, a lot of Filipinos started also reading a lot of their kind of lifestyle and their concepts. And that is, so this one, mostly from the religious and the lifestyle or from the animal welfare perspective, they would be hindrances in terms of the people's acceptance of plant-based meat for the whole nation, because people would think it's only a religious thing and they don't taste as good, or it would be a very a vegan concept, so that there it's pricey or it's extravagant or it's something that they don't want to change their lifestyle for. So it's better for people's acceptance for plant-based meat if we target like flexitarians in this aspect. If anyone would like to add as well.
Yes, I'd like to add on to what Gianna's mentioned as to acceptance of the plant-based meat by Filipinos. So there's actually a lot of increasing movement in terms with veganism promoting through Filipinos. And I think we see more that they're more accessible, like there are more opportunity to access the plant-based, which people would also be more open. And also on based on AEP's experience, so we did some questions. We asked some questions to public, and we see that people are actually familiar, like in terms with helping animals or creating a better future to shift to plant-based. So there's a growing number with them as to the perception of shifting to plant-based. So for us, this is an opportunity to push further with this advocacy.
Okay, so thank you for that, Gianna and Kate. So right now we are very pressed for time, so we can only answer two more questions. But don't worry, we will compile the rest of your questions and we will send the answers to your email along with your certificate. So for the next question, here, this is for cultivated meat. So what seems to be the main barrier for scientists to pivot their research away from cancer or stem cell biology and towards alternative protein applications? Is it the lack of funding mainly or the lack of the awareness?
I can answer this. I think this would be both. So I think cultivated meat is fairly new field, but it's very related to existing fields, and maybe it might not be as heard of in the Philippines, but also funding really plays a big role because, as you may know, um, maintaining cell culture is quite expensive, and yeah, it is pretty costly, and having certain infrastructures in place might be difficult still. But we want to learn more how we can navigate with scientists to get interested and get more involved with this. So this will be towards our next steps.
Right. So thank you for that, Pierce. And now for our last question. Okay, so there's one here, slightly upvoted. Are there any significant differences in the shelf life of plant-based versus their counterparts? So I guess our researchers here are working with plant-based meat would like to answer.
Hello. So the shelf life is mainly dependent on the type of processing it takes. So when it's frozen, it's actually comparable to other frozen plant-based, sorry, animal counterparts. And if it's canned, for example, such as like canned vegetables versus canned meat and then canned plant-based meat, it's very comparable as well because it's in the processing. Maybe Clarice would like to add a little.
Okay, thanks, Gianna. I think that is a good enough answer and it addressed the question well. Right. So now we have a lot more questions here, and some of them are getting highly voted. However, we do not have enough time now to answer these, but these are very interesting questions that we'd like to answer through your email. Okay. So we hope you'd look forward to that email so you can see our answers. Thank you for asking these and thank you for paying attention to our presentation. So now we'd like to go very briefly and quickly to our announcements. Okay, so first, so you've heard about the Good Food Institute. We've mentioned it briefly earlier. So now this nonprofit think tank is opening its application for their alternative protein project. So this is targeted primarily to the university students, but this information is also relevant to some of the professors who are attending this webinar today. So the Alternative Protein Project is basically a student group that would help drive or propel the alternative protein awareness or research initiatives in your university. So you can find out more about this project in their website. And now we flashed the application form also here in the screen. So the deadline for the application is on March 31. So you would not want to miss out on this. So go check out their website and let us know too. We would be interested in knowing if some of the people attending now are interested in this. We would like to help you out too in whatever initiatives you'd want to start here in our country. Okay, next slide, please. So we do understand that here in this webinar today, we do not have much room for mingling or talking to the other stakeholders, but we do know that each stakeholder present today is very important. So we are going to conduct an in-person networking mixer on March 11. So this is a Saturday, and the time would be on 5 to 8 p.m. and the venue will be somewhere in the central Metro Manila. So this is open for all the stakeholders who are here today. So we'd want you to join us and connect, mingle, and even possibly collaborate with some of the people who are already working in the alternative protein landscape or who may be interested in working in it. So we will be serving plant-based food in this event. Now, the sign-ups aren't open yet, but in the feedback form, which we will flash shortly, you can answer or indicate your interest in that form. So there is a question there. Okay, next slide, please. So here for other announcements. So first, we would like you to also participate in our stakeholder exploratory meeting. So this exploratory meeting, we want to conduct this to get your insights on the alternative protein landscape, or maybe you even have feedback on our scoping report. We would love to hear that. And also, we would want to know how each of us can collaborate and help accelerate the alternative protein space. So in this exploratory meeting, this will be very quick. We estimate it would just be 30 minutes, just a getting to know and trying to set the ground for some insights and collaboration or some help, right? So if you want to participate, it will also be found in the feedback form, the question or like the kind of interest thing there. It's available in the feedback form. So another thing is we'd also want you to join our Slack channel and Facebook group. So here in these two platforms, we will share the news, opportunities, and updates about alternative proteins, may it be in the local landscape or in the international scene. So if you want to, I don't know, maybe learn more about it or stay in touch or yeah, maybe even work on it, please do join. So the invitation links, you will find it also in the feedback form. So everything is in the feedback form. We've consolidated everything there. So it's just a one-stop shop for you to answer and you can join all these things that we've prepared. So yes, last announcement. So you can see in the slide right now that we are flashing the link to that so-called feedback form and it's also its QR code. So when you answer this feedback form, you will get your certificate after. And just a quick note, We will close this feedback form by the end of this day. So it will just be open for quite a short while, just today. So make sure to answer now or as soon as possible in order to get your certificate. All right. So we're flashing this for a few more moments so people can take a photo, get the QR code, get the link. We'd want your feedback. So I do know people still have questions and you may have comments. We welcome constructive feedback on our report. We would love to know how we can improve on the webinar and on the report. All right. Okay. I hope you guys got the link already. So yeah, we can now proceed to the end part of the program. So basically what we in the Animal Empathy Philippines, but also us, the researchers who worked on this, we would want to continue the dialogue on the alternative proteins here in our country because we know that it's an emerging field, right? And well, there are already a lot of initiatives. There is still so much potential that we can work on. So I hope that when you guys joined in this webinar, we've piqued your interest, but hopefully after this webinar, you will continue to learn more about it or actually pursue things related to it. So yeah, if you want to connect to us, you can reach us at our email. There you go, team@animalempathy.ph. Or you can also find us on our LinkedIn. So we haven't flashed our LinkedIn profiles here, but this is the names that we're using there. So you will be able to find us easily. So that's it. Thank you so much for tuning in today. We hope you learned a lot, but I do also know that it was a bit short on the time. So please do visit our scoping report. It's much more info heavy and info driven. So yeah, I hope you guys have a great lunch and a great day.